when you log in, what you should see is something like this. And if I've done it right for you, you should already have a server in the list of servers where it says running servers. Does anyone who's logged in not have the list, any servers in their list? That's not too bad. And it should say something like my first GVL server. Okay, so we're gonna introduce what GVL means in quite some detail. Well, that's quite good. So this is simplified. You can see it's a list of running servers, and then you can see a column called flavor, and we are offering 2 flavors for Climb on launch, user and group, obviously, and we will have more flavors in the future. But the reason we've done it like this is because we've tried to make a virtual machine flavor. Flavor defines how many CPUs it's got, how much RAM it's got. And the reason we've done it like this is to try and pack as many of those instances onto those physical machines that Arif told us about. And so this is where Tom's number of about 1,000 comes from. If we use a mixture of user and groups servers, we can have 1,000 of these running. And the point is that each of those servers is yours. It's not for sharing with other people. You share it with your group, but it's yours. No one can mess with it. Well, we can mess with it actually, but no one else can mess with it. And you can do anything you like on it. You have root access. So in Linux or Unix terminology, root means you're a super user. You can do anything you like with it, including completely destroying it such that it's non-functional. That's not a problem if you do that. It's obviously a problem if you had something important on there and you forgot to back it up, but it's not a problem if you wreck these servers, because you can just tear them down with a single command. I'll show you that. And then you can start a new one. So you can go back to the beginning very, very simply, and it is not a problem. And we do that a lot, don't we? We boot these servers and we've done the wrong thing and we kill it and we start again. And that's where images come in. An image is just a record of a server in a certain state. And so the GVL starts off in a certain state, which I'll talk about, with lots of software and lots of useful stuff to do. You can also start servers in different states, like you can have a server with just nothing on it. If someone has done some work and made an interesting pipeline or has an interesting data set and some scripts and they want to share it, they can make what's called a snapshot, which is a copy of the image plus all of the changes that they've made. You can then start a server, which is then your server, which has all that data and software on, and you can start messing around with it. That doesn't change what went before. It doesn't change the copy of the snapshot. You then have a new working copy of it that you can make changes to, and so forth. And the idea is that because we have the cream of the UK microbiology community here in Climb, and we'll be checking that you are the cream later, but because you're the best people doing microbial genomics, and because we're all friendly and nice, when you do cool stuff, you can share it with everyone else here, and they can pick up where you left off. And that's going to be good. That's going to be good for science, and it's going to be good for you. That's really one of the big differences between this system and almost any other system, right? So you're not going to get that on Amazon. Right. So I've gone off on one there, but basically, you have this list of images. You have a group server or a user server. A group server has 8 virtual CPUs, 64 gig of RAM. They all have quite a small boot disk of 120 gigs. And the reason for that is you don't store your data on the boot disk. That's just to get the server up and running and for the system software to be installed on. Data goes somewhere else, and there's various places that
there's
data
a really
goes.
good reason why you don't store data on that boot disk, because there's a chance if you kill that image or you hard reboot that image, it will delete everything on the boot disk and reinstall it from whatever the last save state was. So don't store data on that base image, because it's much more likely to be lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's just general principle is to keep your data on either a volume or a Ceph, and we'll talk about that a bit later. It's not quite true, because if you turn it off and turn it back on again, you will keep
Should be okay.
It should be there. But you're right in principle. That's not the best place to to keep the information. So a group server is, we've either booted you a group server or a user server. It doesn't make much difference. A user server is a bit smaller than a group server. It's got 4 CPUs. It's got 32 gigs of RAM. Same size hard disk.
16 gig, 16 or 30?
I think
30. No, it's 30.
32,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
It's larger.
So we get about 1,000 of those, and that's fine. Now, if you are, does that? I mean, okay, silly question. Does that, for you, does that sound like a lot or a little? Who thinks that sounds like a lot, a group server? Okay, or Alan? Yeah, okay. He's from the East Midlands.
Interested to know, how many of you currently have group servers?
Okay.
What sort of spec are they?
You mean research group servers?
Yeah. Anyone
running a departmental server or group server in there for their research? Is that how, or do you all use clusters?
I've got my own.
You got your own.
I've got my own little dedicated one, yeah.
But most people say don't. Okay.
Saw a few hands up at the back there.
A few hands at the back. All right. Well, so why did you ask that?
I know, because I was just curious to find out what size people's group server currently is and how the virtual one compares to what you currently run.
About twice the size, yeah. Okay. So the point is that if you need more capacity, you can. There's 2 ways of doing it really. You can boot more servers. You can boot more servers up to about 10 on your default settings. But if you are doing things like metagenomics assembly, or you have specific tasks that require lots of CPUs, what you're going to have to do at the moment is you're going to have to talk to us. And the reason that we're not just making it so that anyone can have any number of servers with any amount of RAM and CPUs is because we've seen with our own eyes what happens when you do that. It is not pretty. Is anyone from Ed Feil's group around? Okay? If we give you the ability to boot up servers, as many as you like, with as much CPU and RAM, most people will fulfill the entire system up within a few weeks. And that's fine, but it's not very good for everyone else, not very sharing. What we really need to do is figure that out in the long term, is how we're going to manage that. Because actually, at the moment, Tom said we don't over-provision, which means your little virtual server sits within a physical server, but we don't put more of those virtual servers on the physical server than the capacity of that physical server. So a lot of places do over-provision, which means they put lots more servers on than the computer can handle, and then just relies on the scheduler to work it all out, which means that you don't have any assurance that you're getting, in reality, that number of CPUs or that much RAM, which means that sometimes your virtual machine's very fast, and sometimes it's very slow, and you don't know why. So we decided we didn't want to do that. But the problem is that we'll hit capacity quite quickly if we have an open policy. So we need to, between us, work out a way of managing that. And that's really going to be done with you on the forum in discussion. And you need to tell us why you're doing things, like what you're doing, but also why you're doing things if you've got big requirements. So if you want very large memory servers, we can offer that. We can offer large memory servers up to 2.5 terabytes.
Yep.
And I think we can have something like 20 of those servers across the 4 sites, approximately 20. But if you just take one and sit on it and don't actually use it for a large memory task, it's going to prevent other people doing stuff. So we're likely to have it for very large memory systems, because we can't share those. There's no use sharing them once you've loaded them up with that much RAM and you need it. You have to ask us, fill in a form essentially to request access to those. If you need lots and lots and lots of computation, loads of CPUs, we might be able to help you, but it might also be a job for your local HPC cluster, because that's what HPC clusters are for. They're for when you want to do huge amounts of computation in a batch system, and you wait until there's enough, until there's a slot, and you run lots of computation. Those are much better than Climb for things like that, where you can parallelize it across loads and loads of servers. Okay, so maybe just a show of hands. Who wants Climb because they want lots of RAM? RAM being memory as opposed to storage. Okay, So that's about what I'd expect, maybe a quarter, a third.
Yeah.
Who wants to use Climb because they want lots of storage? All right.
Same
Well,
hands.
storage. So storage is really quite easy for us because we can give you. The quota for storage is, by default is 10 terabytes. We can give you 10 terabytes, and it doesn't actually cost us anything until you use 10 terabytes. And we actually have quite a lot of storage, both in Ceph and in GPFS, two different storage systems, one faster, one bigger. I think it's about 7 petabytes of raw.
Yeah.
So we can give you as much storage as you want. Storage is quite easy. If you have a storage requirement over 10 TB, just tell us, and we're very likely to be able to sort that out. And who wanted Climb because they wanted lots and lots of CPUs? You've gone off that idea because I told you it was not a good idea. And who wants Climb? Who wants Climb because they just want to have their own server? They don't want some sysadmin telling them what to do. They want to fight the system, do their own thing, be a rebel. Yeah. And who doesn't really know what Climb is and don't know why they're here? Come to the wrong room entirely. All right, sorry. Okay.
Daniel at the back. Standard state, isn't it, Daniel?
Shout out any other reasons that Climb is attractive or useful for your research. What was that? Daniel? What?
Saying it's good that you can share stuff.
It's good for sharing. Yeah. Okay, that was good. All right. All right. Okay. So that's where we are with
He likes the Climb dating site.
He likes. Let's not get it. All right. So that's another. So that's where we are with the usage on Climb. Okay. So we better hurry up, otherwise we're
Bryn.
not going to get anywhere.
Talk to Bryn.
So Bryn, we've got the list of servers, as I said. Each server, you've got options. There's a big difference between stop and terminate. I guess it's why I called it the Terminator. But terminate is in red because if you terminate it, the instance is gone. It's gone forever. We can't get it back for you. Do not email and ask us to get it back for you. We're not going to do it. The instance is gone forever. Now, as I say, you can have another one, go back to the initial state of whatever image or snapshot you're working from. You can do that very easily, but any state that you've left on that image is gone. So that's why terminate's in red. Stop just means it's the equivalent of powering it off. And once you press stop, you can press start, and that's the equivalent of powering it on. There's not actually a lot of good reason to do that. It doesn't really save us. If you stop all your instances, it doesn't save us any resources. You still keep your slot on the real server that your instance lives on. So stop, start, you can do that. More useful is reboot, because sometimes you will find that instances get into a state where you can't access them if you reboot them. That's like doing hard reboots, like turning it off and turning it on again, like the Trident nuclear submarines. It's not like doing Control-Alt-Delete. It's not a soft reboot. That's all you can do there. And then you have a few other options lower down. You can launch 2 categories of servers, if you like. GVL, which we're going to talk about now, is the kind of the image that we're pushing, the one that we want you to use, because we think you're going to agree when you see what it does. It gives you a lot of stuff out of the box that you're going to like. And so it's very simple to set up as well. All you do have to do there is put the name of the server in. That's just a name for you, a tag that you can remember it by. You have to choose whether you want a group style server or a user style server, and then you have to give it a password, and the password will let you access it. So it couldn't really be more simple. However, if you don't want the GVL, and there might be lots of good reasons you don't want the GVL, for example, you're using someone else's image, then you have the ability to launch a server, and here you'll find that the list of images are slightly different between different regions, but here's a list of kind of common versions of Linux or BSD that you've heard of, probably like Ubuntu or CentOS or Debian, and you can just boot a blank instance. There's a big difference between the custom servers and the GVL. The GVL gives you access via a password. These images give you access via an SSH key. So, who knows what an SSH key is?
That's a reassuringly good number.
Good. You know what SSH key is. We had about a day's discussion on it once. You never resolved it, yeah. So SSH keys are a bit more challenging than passwords. SSH key essentially is using public-private key cryptography to give you access. It's still like a password, but it's a password that's split into 2 bits. A bit that you hold on your server, on your laptop or your computer, called your private key, and a bit the server knows about called your public key, and those 2 things link up to give you access. So if you want to use one of these servers, if you've had a key, if you've used a key before, then the key you've put in will appear on that list. More likely, you won't see any keys, or you'll see my key in there, in which case you can choose Make New Key, which is probably badly named, because actually you need to make the key yourself and you need to put it in there. So if you're on a Mac and you've never made a key before, you need to go into the terminal and you run a command called, maybe Tom can put this into the discourse so that people can pick it up later. You need to run a command called ssh-keygen. That's not going to overwrite my key, is it? No, it's not. No. And then it will ask you where you want to save that key, and that will be the default location. That would overwrite my current key, so I definitely don't want to do that. But that's what, if you just want to put it in the normal place where SSH will look for it, you just hit enter. I won't do that, so I'll say test key. You can optionally put a password onto the key, which just secures it more. So then you'll have to put the SSH password in as well. Empty just leaves it blank, which is what most people tend to do. And then it gives you some nerdy Linux stuff, and it writes that key out. The important thing is that it will have made a file called, you'll see it says, your public key has been saved in testkey.pub. And that is the thing that you need to give Bryn, Climb, Openstack, whatever. That's that long string there. So you just copy and paste this. But only that bit, and it's quite important you don't get any extraneous characters. It's a bit rubbish, actually. So what you do in here, you go my lovely key. That's just an aid memoir, and then you paste in that. So that's all actually quite straightforward if you're using Mac or using Linux. Where it gets tricky is if you use Windows. Who uses Windows? Not judging you, but if you're using Windows, you have to get 2 bits of software, which Tom will put this in a blog, in a tutorial post. You have to get PuTTY is the client, which you probably should have got already, and PuTTYgen is the thing that makes the key. And if you want us to help, won't go through that because it's really boring, but if you want help with that, we can help you do that. And then so we want a Ubuntu server. That's the key. Click launch. Didn't give it a server name. My lovely server. Server names, it will prompt you, but just need to be alphanumeric or hyphens. Click launch server, and there it is. This is the message you get when you connect to a server for the first time, and your laptop or your computer doesn't have any record of seeing that server before. It gives you a warning. So it's for security reasons. If you trust that server, you say that you're happy to continue and you press yes, it will try and connect. Now you see it didn't let me in. Who knows why it didn't let me in? Didn't use the right key, guy from OCF. That's why we pay him the big money. Okay, so you got to give it a key name, which is our testkey.pub, like that. Oh no, like that. What is it? .pen, isn't it?
Yeah, it's minus
lowercase.
my side.
Oh,
Yep.
schoolboy. Yeah. So you don't need to do that. If you save the key to the default location, you don't need to do that. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in this. It's boring, isn't it? But Tom's going to put a little tutorial up about it. Anyway, that's let me into my lovely server. There it is. I can do what I like to it. I can just delete everything on it if I want to. Oh, it's dangerous to do that, it says. Didn't even let me do that anymore. That would just destroy the entire file system. Yeah, that's quite good, isn't it? It doesn't even let you do that. That's the way of deleting everything. Anyway, so that's a very boring server. It's Ubuntu. You can do whatever you like, but the critical thing is you can do sudo if you want to be super user. And just as soon as it lives, it dies. So let's get on to biology and interesting
GVL.
stuff. So what Tom's referring to here is that this is the simple interface, and we like the simple interface, and it does what we think most of the things that you need. But for complicated things, like making volumes, attaching volumes, and changing the networks.
And if you've got a virtual machine that you want to create and share, then that's the route that you have to use to get it into the system at the moment.
We'll just have a quick. We'll have a quick look. Just a really quick look at it, but like not look at all the boring details.
I've got it up here.
You got it there. Right.
When you're on your Bryn page, it gives you a username and a password. If you hit the Horizon link, it will give you a login page that looks like this. So you cut and paste your username and your password. And so what you've got on here is it's an overview of the quota that you've got and how much of the quota that you're using. So it's quite useful in some ways. It gives you an idea of how many instances you can run, the number of vCPUs you've got access to, and on the side you have a series of categories. So you can view the instances that you've got running. So this is my Warwick account running off of Bryn, and you can see I've got a set of GVL servers running there. On the system, and you can do the same things. So you can do the terminate, you can do stop, you can do reset via Horizon, but you also have a set of extra capabilities as well. So you can create a snapshot. You can do funky things with floating IPs which you don't want to play with necessarily, and you can actually have quite a lot of control over the security groups and the security policies that go around those instances. So
you can set up a firewall and things like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of capability there. As you can see, there's a lot of options there. If you just want to run the GVL, if you just want to run an instance, you don't have to care about any of that, and you probably should just be using Bryn. If you want to do stuff that's custom or something that's a bit different, that's when you have to start worrying. Similarly, you have volumes, and this allows you to create manually volumes of whatever size you want. So it's quite useful if, say, you wanted to create a single huge volume attached to a single huge VM and store all your data in there. You can do it through this interface. It lets you specify the volume size that you want to do. And it's relatively simple. You ask it to create volume, give it a name, volume type, Ceph, say a terabyte. Helpfully, it tells you how much of your volume limits you're using, and you've got a limit on the number of volumes. And then all you have to do to create that volume is you hit create volume, and magically it then appears, and these can be attached to virtual machines.
So that's like running down to PC World and buying a 1 TB hard drive, but a lot quicker.
Attaching it in there. The thing to remember about volumes is if you create a bare volume like that, when you attach it to a virtual machine, you have to still create a file system on that volume. So it's not quite ready for use. It's a bit more involved.
Will you put up a little tutorial about how to make and attach a volume?
Yeah,
that would be quite useful.
And the other thing that you could do from here, obviously, is if you take a snapshot of a volume, so you've got a volume that contains a load of data and you want to share that, or you want to do something else, you want to snapshot it at a point. When you snapshot it, all your volume snapshots appear in a separate location. And you can create a new volume using a volume snapshot. So it will give you a new volume that contains just the data that was in that snapshot.
And volumes are really the place for permanent data that you do want and you don't want to be destroyed by accident. So it's very, very well, if you're going to use Climb, probably one of the first things to do is to set up a data volume. The other good thing about volumes is, as I say, it's just like a 1 TB hard drive. It's the same in that they're not connected to any particular instance unless you connect them up. So you can connect up a volume onto an instance, and then you can disconnect it and connect it to another server later on. I keep saying instance. If I ever say instance, I mean server, because it's just an annoying word that they use. But so you can move your volumes around. The only thing that's a bit rubbish is you can't connect a volume to more than one server at the same time. And this is one of the biggest problems that we've been trying to tackle in terms of making Climb more usable for data sharing. Because it's both quite difficult to share data within it's quite hard to share data within your group.
Yep.
It's actually quite easy to share data between groups, and because we've got a thing called Ceph for that.
Yep.
But sharing data within groups is quite difficult. The way we get around it in my group is we have an NFS server, a network file system. So we have one server running with a volume on, big volume, that has an NFS server on it, and then all of your instances, all your oh god, I need a stick if I say instance. All of the other servers can then be clients to connect to that NFS server and share the same data. But you have to set it up yourself, and it's a bit annoying. So I think in future we want to have a system that's automatic for that.
And there is that is understood. So within the Openstack project, there's actually a component called Manila, which is in development at the moment, that's meant to enable you to do that. So it is something that's coming, and we're hoping will be available soon. The other thing that's useful to note on the volume page is that when you attach a volume to a server, it gives you the path on the attached to, so /dev/VDA in the case of the top one. And what that means is that when you log into that server, that's the location that you can mount from, so you can just cut and paste onto the command line.
Yeah, so I just did that a bit quickly, but what I was just showing there is how you attach a volume to a running server. So on the drop-down list, you have Manage Attachments, which is highly non-intuitive, and then you choose the server that you want to attach that volume to. So this is your copy of your first GVL server, not any of yours, and you hit Attach Volume. And then it works, and then it tells you the mount point. It tells you the virtual device within Ubuntu or within GVL that you can mount or make a file system on. That's what I know. Like, it's I would say this is quite non-intuitive, this stuff, and it's going to take you a bit of time to learn it. But once you get to grips with it, it's not too bad.
And on the flip side, the thing is that once you've been doing this for a little while, the ability to add terabytes of storage to any virtual machine that you want with the click of a couple of mouse clicks is actually quite nice. Yeah. So,
are you done with
the last thing? So the other solution for generating keys. There's two things. So one is we have images, and the images are the list of different server operating systems that you can spin up a VM with. If you want to share your own VM and you want to manually upload it, you do it through images. And similarly, if you snapshot an image with a load of software in it, that's how you interact with it, through the Images tab. And that's where you can set things like making it public. So you can see you've got at the top project shared with me in public. And you can choose whether you want the image to be just available within your project or whether you want to share it more widely. And if you share it more widely, then whenever somebody else logs in, they'll see your image available on the public listing. So it's quite an easy way to share virtual machines.
But this is really the flip side of doing things like this. So you've got total control over your project and the servers and the volumes and the firewalls and everything. So you don't now need to talk to sysadmins to do stuff. The problem is that you now need to become a sysadmin yourself. So just bear that in mind. You know, we try and make it simple with the GVL, but you know, there is a certain amount of knowledge you're going to need to develop if you're going to use this effectively, and there's not really much way around that, I'm afraid.
So the last thing is, if you're on Windows, this might actually be simpler than generating a key in other ways. Certainly, it's nice and easy on Mac or on Linux. If you want to generate a key pair, you can go to the Access and Security tab, click Key Pairs, and then click Create Key Pair. You give it a name, and then it creates the key pair and downloads it automatically. So that's a bit quicker if you don't want to go on the command line and do a key gen there. OpenStack will do that, will generate the key pair and automatically add it in for you as well. So it's slightly easier to use. The other stuff, so you see there are some other categories there, like network, object store and orchestration. You're free to mess around with them if you want, but you might destroy your tenant, so I advise against it. So I'm not going to go through them.
There be dragons.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about GVL a bit. Okay, so I've got 4 servers in my group here, and these bottom 2 are GVL servers. We've actually made we've made hyperlinks for all these servers, but actually that will only work if it's got a web server running on it. And GVL comes with this inbuilt web server. So we're just going to talk a bit about how the GVL works.
So just to prefix this, the GVL is obviously on Climb, and it looks very nice, and we'd love to take the credit for it, but this is actually developed by the VLSCI group in Australia in Melbourne. So Simon Gladman, Torsten Seaman, and so the group that's led by Andrew Lonnie, and this is we think this is a lovely resource. It was developed for the Australian Federal Research Cloud, the Nectar Cloud, as part of funding locally, and we've been working with them to get it moved over and running on Climb because we think it's such a great resource. So although we're using it heavily and we're working with the guys in Melbourne, they're the ones who've developed this, and we think it's a wonderful thing, and so we're it's great to be able to present it.
The other thing that's really good about working with that group is that not only GVL is quite easy to use, it's also the place where Torsten Seaman's and Simon Gladman's software is pre-installed and working. So for those doing microbial genome analysis, so you'll have heard software like Velvet Optimizer, Procker, which is an annotation pipeline, Abricate, which is an antibiotic resistance gene prediction pipeline. Snippy, which is a variant calling pipeline. Nullarbor, which is a kind of pipeline of pipelines for doing public health microbiology, things like MLST typing. You know, I think in the field now, people are starting to standardize around tools like that made by that group because they just work very well. They're quite mature. They have lots of options that you want to use, and so that's a really good reason because some of those tools, although they're good, they actually are quite difficult to install from scratch.
And so this is, in a way, this is a great demonstration of why the virtualization approach works so well. Is that you can package up a huge number of tools which are of use to a wide number of users, and you can do that in a single image that can be spun up on demand.
So I'm hoping that after coffee, this will be the thing that you're kind of going to focus around and do and explore yourself. So I want to give you a kind of whistle-stop tour of the features without going into a huge amount of detail. So Galaxy, who's uses Galaxy? Yeah, a couple of people.
Who's told other people to use Galaxy? Yeah, no, because that's what I get. Is I get people coming in who want me to do something which they can do themselves, and it's a great tool for pointing.
Well, that's a really good point because I don't use Galaxy personally. I appreciate it, but I'm not a fan of it for my own research because I don't like doing bioinformatics over a web interface. I much prefer to do it the command line. However, I use it because we often have project students, undergrads, that want to do a simple task, and I don't even want to go through how to set up a key, set them up an account on the server. I just want them to be able to do simple tasks like maybe align some sequencing reads against a reference genome, you know, do an annotation of an assembly, something like that. And this is a great way of doing it. So the point is, even if you don't really use Galaxy yourselves, this is a Galaxy server that you can give to people with data preloaded or with pipelines preloaded. So you essentially can administer a Galaxy server on behalf of other people if that's something you want to do. If you don't want to use it, obviously you don't have to. So there's a nice tutorial which shows, and this is a customized version of Galaxy. Galaxy out of the box is more tailored for kind of model organism genetics than it is for microbial genetics. This is the microbial flavor of Galaxy, which means it's got quite a few specific tools like Procker, the annotation pipeline, built into it. And one of the tutorials you could do in the afternoon is the sepsis tutorial, where you can analyze a single bacterial genome, I think it's a Staph aureus, do an assembly with spades, do annotation with Procker, and there's even an option to visualize the output in JBrowse and get a genome browser within Galaxy. And so if you want to do that, the first thing you have to do on your GVL is you have to register, because this is a Galaxy server. You have to actually set yourself up as a user. I'm already logged in, but if I log out, then you get a registration option, and you can just put whatever you like in there. This is where I won't remember what password I set up. I did. And so the way that the tutorial starts is that you have to upload some data sets. I've given you a link to those on the tutorial. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Not that one. You can just, so here we've got a GenBank file, a FASTA file, a GFF file, and a couple of FastQ. It's kind of toy reads. They're quite small data sets, deliberately to make the tutorial quicker. Just a 4 meg FastQ files, and you can just do that. Choose them. It will automatically detect what the files are based on the file extension. Hit start, and it will upload them and add them into what's called the Galaxy history. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how Galaxy works. It's quite complicated. But you know, the history is the list of stuff that you've done or the files that you have.
So the highlights, I guess, for the GVL that we're going to touch on now are mostly covered in the tutorials. So rather than us running through them, we think it's better if you get on and do that yourself.
But just to say, down the bottom left, we've got things like NGS annotation, like Procker is in there, Barnap for ribosomal stuff, SNP-F for variant effects if you're doing variant calling. There's a bit of metagenomic stuff in there as well, or mainly 16S actually. Snippy's in there for variant calling pipelines in there. And I just show you just spades. If you do microbial genomics, you'll have used spades, but you can run it through here and give it those 2 FastQ files. This is all documented, so I'm not going to go into detail. Insert files. No, I don't want that. And then just hit execute. And then the spades job starts up on the right here. And generally the rule is with Galaxy, those boxes start grey and they either go green, which means that it's good, it's produced the file successfully, or they go red, which is bad and something needs fixing. So I don't think there's a way of really knowing that it's doing very much, though, is there? You just wait, don't you? There you go, it's gone green. So there's a bit, that's one of the things I actually hate about it most. You can't really tell what's going on. But anyway, so now you see it's made an assembly and you can look at it. So it's made some assembly with six scaffolds, 6 contigs, biggest contig, 132 KB, 10x coverage. And then you can then use those scaffolds or contigs for the next step, like the Procker annotation, whatever you want to do. So that's probably just about enough Galaxy, just because it's a bit boring, isn't it? Right. So other things. I'm going to skip over Cloudman just for now, and we'll come back to Cloudman. Most people access their VMs through, we access our VMs through the SSH client through the command line, but there's no reason you have to do it that way. You can also VNC into your server. Now here the password is Ubuntu. The username is Ubuntu, and the password, for your images, will be climb launch yay, or if you make a new server, whatever you set it to, and then you get essentially a virtual desktop running within the web browser like this, which almost doesn't fit very well. I thought there was presenter mode in Chrome. Where's presenter mode gone? Anyone know? Okay, I'll just get rid of those. That's better. Yeah, and so then again, you can log in. There's various different user accounts that are set up here. But the password will be whatever the startup password is. And then this is a desktop called Lubuntu. Don't ask me why. And this gives you a GUI interface, and it also means you can run graphical software. So I think Artemis, for example, is already installed. So Artemis is already installed. So if you wanted to look at something you just generated in Galaxy, you could load up Artemis and look at it on there. And I think there's a few other graphical things that are installed on there, like R, and you can have a look around there.
Again, this is particularly useful if, say, you're a Windows user and you can't run X Windows when you SSH onto the server, because obviously if you're doing everything via the command line, you can just run X Windows and bring something like Artemis up that way.
This is just a reminder about how you connect to your server via SSH. That's not a link. That's just just an aid memoir of the IP address of your server and the command that you type in on a Mac or Linux to access it. One of my favorite features of the GVL, and I think one of the ones that is underused at the moment, but probably will become more popular, is this thing called Jupyter, which used to be called IPython Notebook, and they've renamed it because IPython Notebook was specifically to do with Python, and Jupyter is to do with lots of different programming languages. And the whole, so who's heard of IPython Notebook Jupyter? Who's used that? Okay, it's quite interesting, like what the diversity of different experiences in the room. So hopefully everyone is going to learn some new things. We like Jupyter and IPython Notebook for the purposes of reproducible research, and the way that it contributes to the ability to do reproducible research is that you have this notebook. The notebook is usually, as I say, oriented around Python, but it could be oriented around Bash scripts or around R scripts, if you like. What it lets you do is it lets you interactively do coding in Python. So it gives you a Python shell that lets you do things. So I'll show you that in a minute. But it also lets you write documentation, and it lets you have a mechanism for sharing usually processed data sets and code that are kind of mixed together. And so what that means is if you've done a reasonably complicated bioinformatics analysis with lots of steps, and you've done, in the middle, you've had a look at the output of some software and you've done some statistics, and maybe you've excluded all the outliers because they make it look not pretty, you can document each of those steps that you've done such that when you publish your journal article, the figures and the tables can all be derived back from the original data. You essentially provide all of the steps that you went through to get from the bit of raw information, whether that's a sequencing run or mass spec or lab work. You show how you got from there to the final display item. And that's very, very, I think that's quite compelling these days, where I think there's an increasing awareness that the literature is not always reproducible, or there is certainly the methods section in manuscripts don't fully capture the work that was actually done, because it would almost be too messy and too ugly to try and write out in prose what you did. And so this gives you an opportunity to make research that is robust, and it also gives you the opportunity if you're a group leader to look at to look at what your group are doing and investigate their data sets. And it also means you can, so for example, for quite a few of our papers that we've published, we have our IPython notebook. So you want to do the kind of analysis we've done, you can download that and reuse it. So for example, the Ebola work that I'll talk about tomorrow. So in here, the way it works is if you just, by default, it's a code box. And so if you put a bit of code in, a bit of Python, anything that will execute as Python code, and press the kind of play button, it will execute what's in that cell and spit out the answer. And so that code can be complicated, or it can be simple. And you also can add shell commands in here. So if you start a shell, if you start a cell with the exclamation mark, put something like ls, that will actually run a Unix command. And so you can mix and match shell commands, executing a workflow, executing a pipeline with some Python script to actually read it in. You can also, I don't know if this will work out of the box, you can also do R. This probably won't work unless I load an extension. Let's see. Thinking about it. Oh no, it is doing it. This is where my R isn't very good. Need to do, let's get some demo. What's the demo data in R? Cars. MT cars. Is it a library or something? Okay, and what data frame do you get with that? What data is it? It's a data frame. It's just called empty cars or something. No. Okay. Don't know if that's working actually. Yeah, I'm not convinced that's actually working. So I think you might need to load some magic to do that.
Yeah.
It's just called, yeah.
So?
Oh, what? Is it just cars? No, I think it's empty cars.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the R. I need to look into this. So I haven't played with this much, but I think we need to maybe load an extension to do that. So I won't do that now. But then the other thing is you can put in documentation as well. And then you can have a intersperse. So what would be quite nice is if we actually look at a real example of an IPython notebook. So we could look at the Ebola work that Josh Quick and I did quite recently. And this is the IPython notebook that goes with our paper. And so this is stored in GitHub, which is a source code repository. And if you look at it in GitHub, it actually renders it within GitHub, so you can see. And so this is an example. So here's the metadata being extracted from a SQL database and doing some analysis on it. And so what we have here is a bit of R code that reads in the metadata and runs ggplot. And then you can see the output of R is interspersed in the notebook. Here we've got a bit of bash script to pull information out of a SQL database, a bit more R. That might be the command you need to get R working actually. And so yeah, so that's one where we're interspersing R. Let's just see if that is what we need. Already loaded. Okay. All right. Well, I'll try and figure that out and add something onto discourse about how you intersperse R. So that's IPython notebook. How are we doing for time?
It's about 1:15.
Okay. Time for coffee nearly. So let's get to the end of GVL.
Yeah.
And so Jupyter, IPython notebook, very good. The other thing that I think is awesome to have built in is RStudio. If you use R, then you should definitely use RStudio. It's the best way of doing R development. There's empty cars. So this provides you a working R environment running on the server, which looks just like RStudio if you downloaded it, but it's actually running in your web browser, and gives you the full functionality of RStudio and R. To do stuff. So now I've got empty cars, I can actually do something. So I want to do some plotting. We can plot miles per gallon of these cars versus the number of cylinders they've got as a scatter plot, and we could color. Let's do miles per gallon versus horsepower, and then color it by the number of cylinders in the engine, something like that. And there you go. There's the plot comes up integrated. And if you haven't used RStudio before, it's awesome. Yep. But the nice thing about this is because you're running on a server, you've got all the server resources to do more intensive R scripts, and you've also already got access to the data sets that you might want to do R on, so you don't have to get that problem of downloading it all onto your local computer to do the work. So highly recommend playing around with RStudio. Where are we? So, so RStudio. And then the other thing that's quite useful, the GVL provides a public website which is just effectively serving a folder on your local GVL on your local GVL image. And so not very exciting to look at, but it means that if you wanted to share something, a data file, a result with someone outside your group, you can just copy it into that folder and it will appear, and you've got a link to it. Probably not good for long-term sharing, but if you just want to quickly give something to someone via the web, you can do that.
If you're interested in trying the nullarbor pipeline, the final part of the pipeline is it actually generates an HTML report which breaks down all of the results. And so this is a nullarbor. This is actually the nullarbor output you get if you do the nullarbor tutorial. And just to show you what nullarbor does, it gives you information on the sequence data itself with an idea of whether the quality is there. It does species identification using Kraken. It does MLST, sequence type assignation. It uses Abricate to identify resistance genes in the samples. It does an assembly using Spades, and it does an annotation using Crocker.
You can access that if you just type in that URL, right?
Yep. So yeah, if you type, you can get it up on your screen. You give it a reference genome at the start, and it does mapping. It defines the core genome using Snippy and calls variants, and then it draws a phylogenetic tree using FastTree of that core that core defined. It calculates pairwise core SNP distance based on that alignment, core SNP density, and then it uses Rory to work out the pan genome as well, and then it draws a tree on the pan genome. So that's pretty much every step you might want to do for a first look at data. And actually, I think they use this in Melbourne for first looks on bugs coming through their NGS pipeline in the public health lab. And because there's a lot of useful information you can get very, very rapidly just by running this pipeline. So I suggest you have a go, but the nice thing with the GVL is because you've got that public HTML directory there, you can just punt stuff straight over into a suitable directory and share that information out. So it's a really nice way of actually summarizing that data. So if Nick brings up the GVL page, there's one last thing. So you have this set of tools available already, and on the command line you've got a load of extra things that you might want to use. But if you go to the admin tab at the top, and Nick logs in with Ubuntu and with the password, there are a set of other tools that you might want to use. So the GVL works for all sorts of things. So there's various databases that are relevant, things like cancer. But what might be of interest to people in the room, there's two other packages or sets of packages you can install. So one is the PacBio Smart Portal and Analysis software. So you can just click install up there, and that will pull down the packages and install that for you within the GVL to analyze PacBio data, which is quite nice. And then there's this IRIDA system, which is from Public Health Agency of Canada, which you can also pull down and run within the GVL. So this is I mean, this is one of the nice features of this platform, is that as Torsten and as Simon develop the GVL and add in these extra sort of tool sets, it's really easy to actually download them and add them onto the GVL that you're running. So that's worth looking at as well. Yeah,
so the GVL goes through quite regular updates, so the idea is that as new versions of GVL come on stream, we'll offer those. What you don't get with the GVL, it won't update itself. So you don't get the new functionality without starting a new instance, which is why it's so important to have your data on a volume. So every so often you'll see that the version number goes up. We're on 4.1 at the moment. And then if you start a new GVL server, you'll get whatever the current latest version is. And yeah, they're making a lot of changes. A lot of this stuff is new in the last month or two. Yeah. So, and so the last bit, I guess, about the GVL is just to say that, again, you know, mostly we use it through the command line. And that's, I think, where it gets actually very exciting, because there's just a real vast array of stuff that's either pre-built or installed, you know, and things that are useful. So Metaflan's in there, Kraken's in there. If you type in module, is it module list?
Feil.
That gives you a list of stuff that's already installed using. Oh, there's two. It's a bit complicated, but there's two different package systems in here. There's the default package system, and then there's Linux Brew. Linux Brew gives you an access to a whole other set of really good stuff. So if you do Brew search science, you get this massive list of stuff that's in Homebrew science, and the ones with the packages there with tick marks are already installed. So things like BWA and CD Hit you'll be familiar with, Maft, Metaflan I mentioned already. Those are still installed, but Mama, etc. You can see that there's a very, very large number of kind of crucial packages there, and they should just install if you type brew install and then the package name. When I say they should, all these packages rely on the community to keep the recipes to install them working, and they do a really good job. Like Sean Jackman does Homebrew Science, and he spends a lot of time just packaging software and making it work, but it's very hard to keep everything working. But having said that, things should just work. So if we just call one out at random to install Feil, yeah, classic. Back to the 80s. So you see, it knows where to get it from. It knows how to make it, and well, installed in 8 seconds. And Feil's just got a ridiculous. It's all in capitals, isn't it? What's a Feil?
DNA dist, is it?
Dist.
DNA dist.
Oh, DNA dist. Yeah. Oh, it's like war game. It's like war games, isn't it? Please enter a file name. All right. Well, there's DNA dist. So that's pretty cool. So what else? Do you feel lucky? So all of these packages are listed in a thread on the discourse forum. What's the hardest thing to install? What's the hardest Bioinformatics package to install? There are some pretty grim. Amos is pretty grim, actually, isn't it? Amos I saw up there. That's pretty awful. Anyone? Josh, what's the worst one to install? Beast. Beast. Oh,
Beast is there.
Beast isn't that hard to install, is it? Okay, let's try it. Maker. Yeah, that's horrible, isn't it? All right, let's try Beast. So it knows about dependencies. So in this case, it says dependency on ant. Oh, Maker is there. The Ant's a build system, isn't it, for Java or something? Yeah. So yes, I think Brew for package management is for scientific packages is the best way of getting stuff on your system if it's available. Like it works, yeah. Right.
In my experience, there's a lot more available on Brew than there is, say, through apt on Ubuntu or Yum on CentOS or Red Hat. So yeah. It's a much better system for actually.
Portals. Yeah, good one. That's something we wrote. Okay, is that on there? It'd be cool if it was. You mean nanopolish, don't you? Yeah, it's on there, isn't there? That's good, isn't it? I like that effect. Disco.
Old school.
That will obviously work because we wrote it. Okay. So that So what just finish that thought, because the if you use apt, which is the Ubuntu package manager, you'll find a bit of science stuff in there. You know, SAMTools and BLAST and BWA. You'll find there are at least 10 minor revisions out of date. It causes you no end of trouble if you use those. So I think Brew is the best thing. And also Brew, if you find a problem in a Brew recipe, you can go and fix it. And also, if you find that there isn't a package in Brew, you can go and write one. They're not actually that hard to write. So I think that's probably coffee, isn't it? Otherwise, we're going to run too late, and that would be terrible. So I think we'll start and talk. When we start with coffee, we'll run through a bit of some of the tutorials that are available. But I really want to get you guys using it and finding out that it's actually horribly broken for yourself, even though we made it look like it works really well. So where's coffee? Downstairs?
I think it's just outside.
Just outside.
Oh, yeah, out there.
Let's get
Lovely.
coffee. Thanks very much.